liked IPv6 because it was cool, and there's a lot of things about it that you can get into big technical arguments of why it's good. And so that was it was a compelling thing for those groups. And a lot of people at Microsoft and elsewhere, they like to think of the future. They think, well, wouldn't it be great if we could do all of these things? And the current technology, IPv4, is holding the whole industry back. We just can't live with this. We're Microsoft. We have to push we have to take leadership. We have to move things along. And I could see this from everywhere. It wasn't just my VP. This was coming from a lot of different angles. And so there are certain things you can glean. You can just feel the energy. That's what the feeling is in the groups. And so Microsoft strongly believes that program management and PMs are a core part of its success, and there's a firm belief that the way they do program management and the role of program managers is a unique thing that they have, and that it has been a big contributor to their success. And the program management role is highly coveted as a springboard to career advancement. I've known people who were engineers who decided they wanted to become program managers because they felt that was the way they could, if they wanted to move up higher in the organization, they wanted to show they were well-rounded, that they could understand all aspects of the business. So a lot of people want to become PMs. And as I've thought about this a lot, and I thought, well, some of this and there's a lot of senior people at the company too who you can point to and say they were program managers. I've never done a statistical analysis, but there are a lot of senior people at the company who had been program managers. Steven Sinofsky was a program manager. And I think the test group, there was I think the one person that they could point to was Brian Ballantyne before he left. So there's token for some other people. But so PMs are, it's a highly coveted position. But I thought about this, and I'm thinking that the fact that you can point to all these people who had career advancement as being PMs might be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because there's so many of the best people want to be PMs. If all your best people are PMs, then it makes sense that those are people who are going to get promoted and so on. So I don't know how much that is true, but it's something I've thought about. And despite all of this and the culture of program managers in the company, mistakes still happen. So as much effort as goes into program management, and the company puts into thinking about how program management should work, I mean, there's lots of examples you can point to of things that didn't work out well, which isn't to say there aren't successes. I'm not trying to dump on the company, but if I was really going to give a balanced view of program management, it works. It can work as a part of the function at the company. But, there are other companies that have successes and failures too, and they don't all have the exact same structure. So about the best I can say is that program management at Microsoft it's evolved that way. For what I've talked about today is something that's evolved over 20, 25 years. And so it's not going to go away. So clearly anyone working at the company, that's the way things are going to happen. That's a core part of the company. I also think that it's a part of, I think Microsoft is more of an engineering-driven company. And I think it speaks volumes that the program management function is in the engineering groups. It's in the engineering teams. And the program manager is supposed to have this big picture of understanding the market and so on. And I think it's no coincidence that many of the mistakes that Microsoft makes tend to be because it was engineering driven as opposed to customer driven on some things that they do. And I don't think it's a coincidence. And now there are other companies I can point to the exact opposite, and I can say, well, marketing really drives almost everything at that company. And that can sometimes be good, because maybe they're more customer oriented and really focused on giving what customers want. But on the other time, sometimes they're focused on the customer, but they but what they produce is garbage because there was no real thought behind how to build a good product. And so there's no perfect solution to this kind of thing. So if you're looking for a job,
after all you've said,
so after all I've said, if you're looking for job program management at Microsoft, I have some thoughts, and I will come back to say it's not a bad career. I mean, there's a lot, you learn a lot. I enjoy doing it. I don't want people to come away from this discussion tonight thinking, oh God, that'd be the worst place ever to work, and I don't want to be a PM. That's not what I'm trying to put across. And I'm sure that you could do a Dummies guide for any role in any company, and you'd have some unflattering things to say about those roles too. So you got to look at it in the broad context. So now that you all want to be PMs at Microsoft, there's a lot of things you can do to find out what jobs there are, and there's networking things. I can talk about that too in the Q&A if you want to know about how to get plugged into roles and interview and get those interviews. But let's assume you found a role that you want to apply for and you're actually going in for an interview. So I'll sidestep all that stuff. And when you go in for an interview for a program management role, you want to talk a lot about your experiences and things you've done. And use those a lot in your interview. Now, some people would say, I don't have a lot of experience in program management. I've even interviewed people who were right from college. And so in their perspective, I don't have a lot of industry experience. I can't tell you big projects that I've done and stuff. But experience can be a lot of things. It's interesting when I'm asking questions, when I'm interviewing someone asking about some of the projects they've managed. It's really fascinating to hear that somebody helped put together a Boy Scout camp, and I want to hear the challenges of how they coordinated getting this big project done. I want to hear how they did that. So that can be interesting. So you think when you're trying to get your thoughts together, what experiences can you talk about in your interview? Don't just narrow yourself to a narrow technology area and assume you have to talk that way, because some of these skills are transferable. And so if you're talking like typical things that I would want to know when I was interviewing people is I want to hear how good are you at convincing groups of people to do things. So I'd like to hear how when you were putting together a church group there was all this dissent of what should happen and how you managed to get consensus behind doing something. That would be interesting to me. That gives me some insights as to how good you are in your skills in herding cats. So these things can be very helpful. Of course, if you have examples of how you did this in an actual tech situation, that's even better. But I'm just saying you can use other examples. And I've talked with people who were in grad school who worked on projects with some fellow students. And that was interesting too. And I would ask them. I start drilling into that and say, okay, well, how did you make sure that you had your major project was done on time? How did you make sure that you had the right requirements at the beginning? And so I start drilling into that kind of thing. So you can use those as examples in your interviews too. And when you're answering questions, often what's most important is the process you go through to come up with the answer. It's not the answer. It's the process. And so if somebody says, how would we build a good manhole cover? How would we build a good, and I would often pick something that they'd done, right? So if I'm interviewing somebody and they're saying, oh, I used to work in this kind of a business. I used to work in an auto body shop. And I would say, okay, how would you build a better machine to take dents out of doors? How would you how would you do it? What would that machine be? The worst thing you could do is start saying, well, the machine should do this, and it should do this, and it should do this. If you say that just you're tune out. You already proven you don't have what it takes to be a program manager.